Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster Ankit Rajpara here. I welcome all of you to the special collaboration between Chess Neurons and ChessBase India. For this episode of Strategic Mastery series, I have taken all the positions from the topic of restricting pieces. I'll explain more about this concept as we discuss the positions. So let's get started with the first position. So, restricting pieces. It's always good if we restrict our own pieces, right? Yeah, not so much. We are going to see how to restrict opponent's pieces and how that can be helpful for us. See, this is the first position. It is black to play here. And if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. Now, what all things we can notice from this position? The first thing that should be noticed is queen exchange is there. We don't want to give our queen for free or something like that. So that's one of the major decisions that we have to make. What about the other things? See, one thing that I notice is that this bishop has not been developed. And because of that, this rook's activity has been restricted a bit as well. But one of the common mistakes that we do is that we don't focus on our opponent's lack of development, or sometimes we don't focus a lot on our own development when it is not opening. So please remember that development is not important only in the opening, in the early middle game, late middle game. So we can say this is more of like late middle game, end game type of phase. But even then, development becomes extremely important. So opponent has not completed the development. So can we do something about it? Can we try to restrict our opponent for that? There is indeed a way. So we can start with exchanging the queens and then rook e1, not allowing that bishop to move. And as I mentioned before, if the bishop doesn't get developed, then this rook is also restricted. And then we can plan for rook a8. At times there can be bishop g5 ideas, although we have to be a bit cautious because f4 is coming. But we are not in a rush in this position because it's going to be quite difficult for white to complete that development. So we can try to do something about this. Then this is a weak pawn. You can try to get the rook over here or maybe rook over here, something like this. So not going to be a fun position for the opponent to handle. Now, there is another way. So let's say if opponent plays rook d2, maybe rook c2. So then we can make use of the rook lift as well. Rook c5 is the plan and pressure is there here as well. Opponent can try to do this. Now their rook has become active. We can try to exchange it. And then we have this pass pawn here. We're planning to push it and look at these pieces. Still restricted. That's one of the most important things, that if your opponent has not completed the development in the middle game or late middle game, it's still not too late. And you can try to punish your opponent for that. Sometimes we get a bit careless, okay, what we'll be able to do. No, as we saw here, we can do something. Now, let's go for the next position. So this is a black to play here. And please pause the video here and resume once you're ready with the move, in case you want to attempt this position. So let's try to understand this a bit further. Black's bishop is well placed on e3. It's on the outpost square. This rook is on the open file. White's rook is also on the open file. White's knight is a bit active as well. So what should we try to do? See, so we know that if the rook is on the open file, we should get it on the second rank. Such an easy position. Let's play rook d2 and let's go for the next position. If only things were so easy, if only chess was so easy. So we have to look at the things from our opponent's perspective as well. So we have the open file, we can get on the second rank. Opponent has the open file, opponent can get on the 7th rank as well. And that can help the opponent in getting some activity on the king side. So we should try to get our rook on the second rank, but can we stop our opponent from doing the same thing? We can. So we can centralize the knight with a tempo. It's time to give a check. And then the point is, so by the way, don't be in a rush and play rook h8 check. It's not a checkmate or something. The king will escape to g2. So now this rook has been restricted by their own king. So That's what can happen as well. Our own pieces restricting our own pieces. Like here, opponent's king is restricting the rook. And then we can play rook d2. Rook is on the open file, but a blocked rook. And then something like rook h2 can be played, but no problem, we can just win a pawn. We have active pieces. A clearly better position for black to be in. So, as much as you're trying to activate your own pieces, please don't ignore the activity of your opponent's pieces, and sometimes you can make use of their pieces, force them to block their active pieces with their own pieces, like the king was blocking the rook after knight e5, king h3. Now, let's go for the next position. So, this is black to play here, and if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume when you are ready with the move. So let's try to once again understand this a bit further. So the first thing I can notice is that it's an opposite side castling middle game. Then all the pawns on the king side have been pushed, so we have to be a bit cautious about king safety, although based on how white's pieces are, we don't have to worry too much about the potential activity on the king side, because look at these pieces. But still, we should keep an eye on that. And of course, white doesn't have the pawn on c file. We have this rook here. This pawn is also on a4, so some activity chances can also be created on the queen side, and the king is there. So what we should try to do, how we can try to create activity. So in this position, we can actually do one thing, and that will help us in not only improving our piece, but also in restricting our opponent's piece. So there is this very strong move, bishop a6, putting pressure on that knight. Knight goes to c3, the only proper square the knight can go to. What next? So the knight got restricted. So are we fine with just that? Not so much. At times we can try to be greedy. So it's time to play bishop c4. Look at that queen. That queen on a2 was already restricted, and now it would have to go to a1. That's just sad for the queen. The queen can't go anywhere. And then what we can do? Knight b7. What's the plan? We can bring the knight over here, then over here. Then there can be at times ideas of knight a5. Somehow if opponent deals with knight b3, although it's a good question, how will they? But we can try to move the bishop and then knight c4. There can be at times idea of b5, b4 as well. So because the knight got restricted, because the queen got restricted, the activity that we will be able to generate on the queen side with our active pieces will be significant. So bishop a6, bishop c4, not only improving the bishop's position, but also restricting the knight, but also restricting the queen, and then going for the counterplay on the queen side. Now, let's go for the next position. So this is white to play here. And if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. So let's discuss more about this position. So as I can notice, the material is equal, but the pawn structure of black is not that great. Double isolated pawns. But the thing is that there are no open files. There are some semi-open files, for example, but there are no open files. And there are just major pieces. So no bishop, no knight. So and without open files, it will be a bit tricky for us to do something about these, and then this rook is defending it. But still, because we have control of the semi-open file, we have some activity definitely. So what more can be noticed in this position apart from the things that I have mentioned? There is one thing. Look at that rook on a6. What exactly it is doing? Defending this and defending this? Yeah, it is. But still, we can't call it an active rook. But we have to remember that just because a piece is not doing something right now, doesn't mean that it will stay there forever. If we give opportunity, rook b6, and then maybe this rook to b8, or black and black, I don't like that rook over there, I'll play rook b6, then rook b8, and then maybe this, or then maybe something like this. So can we do something about that rook? And indeed we can. We can play c5. Very small, nice little pawn move. And this rook, where will it go? Even it goes to a5. Where next? And that's a huge problem for black. So in this position, maybe if rook come a5, queen e1, sadly the rook will have to go back. And then rook f2. It's time to put pressure on the king side. Something like queen g7. Simply improving the position. We are not in a rush at all. h5, rook f6. Let's improve the rook's position. This is under pressure. And then this is just a bit too much for opponent to handle. If rook e8 or something, we can play queen c4. Pressure on here as well. So that's what a restricted piece does to opponent's position. So rook on a6 was a bit restricted, but there was potential to improve it. And we took away that potential by taking away that b6 square. And black is just playing without a rook for practical purposes. So a really nice pawn move to restrict opponent's rook. Now let's go for the next position. So this is white to play here. And if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. So let's try to understand this position a bit further. So many things are happening actually here. So just a pawn has been exchanged. Development has been completed. So we can say this is more like an early middle game type of position. There is tension here. So we have to be a bit cautious about that, because that would help opponent in activating their rook. So what next? This seems like a natural move, but we have to be once again capture. There can be this. Yeah, it doesn't seem that great. So then we can be like, all right, maybe we can move the queen over to b3 or something. But then once again, c takes d4, and this knight is a bit of a problem. Some of you would be thinking also about, let's play knight e6. Let's just give up this pawn of ours, but we will have double bishop advantage, and we can do something. It is interesting. You will have some compensation for that, but still not the best idea. See, let's focus on this c5 pawn. If the pawn remains on c5, what happens? The rook remains restricted. Number one, it's clear. This knight also remains restricted to an extent. How? The knight cannot get to c5. This bishop also remains restricted to a point. Why? Because this c5 square is not available for the bishop. So that pawn of the opponent is actually restricting the activity of the opponent. So, but opponent is trying to exchange it. So then what should we try to do? So sometimes, to keep the opponent's pieces passive, to keep the opponent's pawn there, we are going to sacrifice a bit of a material. And that's what we can do in this position, by playing d5. So these pieces don't get active. But the question here is, why did we sacrifice a pawn, and are we getting enough activity for it? We will. E takes d5, knight takes e5, and then it's time to create activity because we have sacrificed a pawn. Just restricting opponent's pieces is not enough. Knight g5, putting pressure on this. There can be knight e5 idea to increase the pressure over here. That was the plan. Your combination, it's very important. Just restricting the pieces of the opponent is not enough. We have to create our own activity. Otherwise, opponent might get the time to, safeguard their position. So that's the thing. Now, if let's say knight 5f6 is played, we are not in a rush. We have to sacrifice a pawn. We should not be, oh no, I sacrificed this, that. No. Let's bring in our last piece that was not doing much. Rook e1. And if h6, now all of our pieces are active, it's time for the sacrifice. Knight takes f7. Bishop d. So in this position, rook takes d7, knight takes d7, then bishop d5 check. So king f8, queen h7. So see, this is what active pieces will do to you. This is what restricted pieces of the opponent will do. So combination of these things, and then at certain point, it will become a bit too much for our opponent to handle the pressure. So I hope through these examples, you got the perspective of how not only just activating our own pieces, but restricting our opponent's pieces is also important. Sometimes we can do it with their own pawn. Sometimes we can do it with our pawn. Another time we can do it by activating our pieces. bishop a6, bishop c4. Sometimes we can do that by making use of their own piece, their own king. And then here it was actually undeveloped pieces of the opponent. And then even if it is late middle game, still we can try to take advantage of that. So thanks everyone for watching the video, and please provide your valuable feedback in the comments. Lastly, don't forget to check chessneurons.com, your go-to platform for improving your positional chess. I'll see you in the next video.